Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada will not back down from this trade war, but he's also warning Canadians of economic pain and promising support to get people through it.
I won't sugarcoat it. This is going to be tough, even though we're all going to pull together, because that's what we do. We will use every tool at our disposal so Canadian workers and businesses can weather this storm. From expanding EI benefits and making them more flexible to providing direct supports to businesses, we will be there as needed to help. But Canada, make no mistake, no matter how long this lasts, no matter what the cost, the federal government and other orders of government will be there for you.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says he's supportive of retaliatory measures, but he remains skeptical of the government's overall plan.
Counter tariffs must not be a cash cow for the government. Almost every penny of the tariffs collected should go to tax cuts, with a small sum set aside for targeted relief to workers hardest hit by the trade war. None of the money should go to new government spending and programs. We must not allow politicians to dishonestly use this crisis to once again launch a debt-fueled, money-printing spending spree that will drive up inflation and further destroy the working class and hit the poorest people the hardest.
Meanwhile, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says all parties must be united in this moment, even if it means delaying an election.
We saw in the pandemic that we understood the severity of the situation required us to come together to pass legislation to be able to support Canadians. And what I'm saying is I want supports of workers done first. An election is secondary to that. First, let's get the support in place for those workers. Let's make sure they get the help that they need. People are already losing their jobs, and then we can worry about an election after that.
Okay, let's bring in the Tuesday Power Panel. Emily Nicola is a columnist for Le Devoir. Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal National Campaign Director. Françoise Boivin is a former NDP MP. And here with me in the studio, Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst. Gang, just to let you know, we may have to pause for 1 second at any point because a senator from Vermont is just moments away from joining us. So, Michelle, I just want to start with you. I mean, what did you make of the Prime Minister was very forceful in his response today, leading with Russia, saying this is really about annexation, and being very blunt with Donald Trump. What do you make of the national response today?
I thought the Prime Minister was bang on. I thought he wasn't pulling any punches. He was calling a spade as well. We know this isn't about fentanyl or the border. This is about Donald Trump and some agenda that he has, and wanting to weaken us as a country. And nobody should be fooled by that. And it also appears there's nothing at all that we could have done. And I think Mr. Mr. Poilievre even reiterated that as well. These tariffs were coming in any case. I think he struck the right tone as best you can about the fact that the government will be there for Canadians and that it's going to be difficult. And there's no need to sugarcoat that either. It is going to be, if this is prolonged, it is going to be brutal. And, there's going to be businesses that actually start feeling this immediately. And that means that families are going to be further struggling, and it's going to be a really tough time. But I thought that the overall tone, while I can quibble with bits of it, was positive in terms of the Canadian reaction from all parties and wanting to come together as Canadians.
Kate, and just to let you know, I see the senator connecting there, so he might be ready in just a second. The point that nothing could have been done to avoid it. I mean, fentanyl seizures at the border are done 97%. They've done the border plan. It was well received by people. Less than an ounce is being seized now. I mean, what is your sense of what it is the president is doing here?
Yeah, I think we could spend a lot of time psychoanalyzing Donald Trump's motives. We
sure could, yeah. It's a 2-hour show, though.
But I think the response, indeed, I think the response today is the right one. We need to hit back. We need to have retaliatory measures. I thought the government did a good job with that and in making that clear. And I think that there's some political consensus as well that today is the moment for that. You see your premiers ripping up contracts, et cetera. I think attention should quickly turn to what the plan is for tomorrow and the day after that.
Well, Howard Lutnick said they might meet in the middle tomorrow. I mean, who knows what that means?
Perhaps, perhaps the plan for next week then.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is There are systemic things that need to change about Canada's economy and how we do business, how workers are paid, how companies are taxed, and how we position ourselves to be open for investment. Today is the day to be very frustrated and upset and have these retaliatory measures. I think Canadians are quickly going to be asking, okay, well, what's the plan to make Canada more resilient? And we're going to move away from the immediacy of this moment into what's the plan for the future. And that's going to force the government to take a hard look at a lot of the things they've championed for a long time, including the carbon tax, including the slow pace of housing growth in Canada. So there's things that will need to be looked at that will draw some attention, I think, to some vulnerabilities that have been created through current government policy. I think Canadians are going to be very much looking to that once the immediacy of today has worn.
Yeah, these are a lot of things we need to look at as a country, regardless of tariff threats, really, but yes. Certainly the urgency is magnified by what's happening there. Françoise, I wonder if we can start with you. What are your thoughts on what you heard there? I mean, obviously, the quarrel here is not with the American people, it is with the American administration, and the senator seems to side with Canada, at least intellectually. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll hear many, many more say exactly the same thing, but the fact remains that we have those tariffs, that they were imposed, and Canadians got their wake-up call for most of them. A lot of us knew that it was coming, although we didn't know exactly what shape, what date, and so on and so forth. So we kind of felt like puppet in the hands of Donald Trump, not exactly knowing what would be tariffed with tariff, what wouldn't be, what exact date, the percentage, and so on and so forth. So today is the point of no return. Even if, like you were showing us, even if Donald Trump changed his mind tomorrow, I do think that the wake-up call that the Prime Minister made us all feel today by saying his maybe harsh word. Not sure he would have said it if he was still running, but thank God he did say it, because he said exactly what is, that Donald Trump is not to be trusted, that this measure is dumb, even if the guy might be intelligent. That remains to be seen. And that being said, we have to act as if those tariffs, even if he'd remove them tomorrow, we need to pull together and show that we are a proud, independent country. And I think Donald Trump has succeeded beyond my wildest dream as a federalist in Quebec to unify us all. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Right. So kudos to him for that aspect.
Well, we'll see if that lasts more than 24 hours.
We'll see if, the Republican, it's the Republican I would like to hear from. How do they feel about a relationship that is just being flushed down the drain after such many moments in history that we were shoulder to shoulder fighting with them. So it's very discouraging.
Yeah, I want to get Emily in here, but just I did see a headline on CNN today saying White House inundated with calls from GOP, the Grand Old Party of the Republicans, who are unhappy with the tariffs. So there's some pressure. The Republicans, though, Emily, they're not coming on Canadian news. They're not even going on American news to criticize this president. People are saying, well, you're talking to Democrats? Well, they're elected. They're part of it. Here we are. What are your thoughts, Emily, on where we are at this point in the day?
I think today has been about the response to the tariff that has come in. And I think it should be that in terms of where public officials are concerned. I think, however, as far as we as concerned as Canadian citizens, this is not your regular tariff commercial TikTok. This is not your normal commercial conflict. What's at stake is Canadian independence, Canadian sovereignty, and I think that is why there is no chance that things go back to normal in 24 hours. There is no chance that the moment in which we're living, where Canadians are feeling more solidarity, unity, boycotting, stopping their vacations in the U.S., being careful about what they buy, trying to figure out ways to make the Canadian economy more resilient, that feeling is there to stay, because what cannot go away tomorrow, regardless of what Lutnick says, is the feeling that we cannot trust the Americans, that this is a chaotic relationship that we cannot rely on. It's already having impacts on people's ability to attract investment in Canada. It's already having an impact on the value of Canadian dollars because there's that level of uncertainty, and that is there to stay. And obviously, there's been so many things happening in the last couple of days that we're not necessarily drawing the connection that much because it's just there's a cognitive overload happening between what's being announced today and the conversation with Zelensky at the Oval Office. To me, the stuff of my nightmare, David, I'm not saying that this is what's happening tomorrow, but the stuff of my nightmare is Putin actually threatening Canada and the Americans extorting us to come to our defense, which they're obligated to do by treaty. The ways in which we've seen on Friday Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump essentially sharing the same agenda means a massive threat to Canada as well as Europe. And I feel like in the last days, we focused more on the threat it means to Europe, but we also need to understand that it is a threat to us. And so, yes, there is the tariff, but there are other geopolitical games that could be played in terms of making us weaker. And as much as it is really important for premiers and ministers to be focused on one day at a time, I think us in the public and in broader Canadian society need to have the headspace to reflect on all the pieces of the puzzle, all the pieces of the chess games that are moving at the same time, because that is the only way in which we will have foresight in terms of what could be threatening us next.
Well, Michelle, Emily has really touched on something there, right? Because if you look at what happened in the Oval Office on Friday when President Zelensky was there, the Prime Minister deliberately led with a comparison to Russia in his prepared statements today. You talk to diplomats in this town, they're all very worried about where the U.S. is going. It's gone from a wary respect to a lack of trust and fear in some ways, than that you just cannot trust this country and count on this country for the foreseeable future.
Well, I think it's more you can't trust that president and who happens to run the country. And the problem, it lies at his feet. Nobody actually speaks for that government except for him. Nobody knows what he's going to do next, how he's going to respond next, or anything like that. And he's surrounded by sycophants who just kind of jump up and try and do his bidding rather than stand up to him and give him good advice. And so, the picture that Emily was painting out is incredibly frightening. I want to hope that there is a possibility of a much better global alliance and and a way for us to be working more closely with Europe. Mm-hmm. And for those that are kind of talking about the Europe Plus kind of alliance with some countries that are in NATO and as well as others, and including Canada in that, that's something that we have to really open our minds to, both economically and geopolitically. Because the next 4 years, I don't think that anybody had this on their bingo card in the first 45 days. I don't know what your count's at, Nate, now. Oh, gosh, there's still a long way to go.
Well, we're about 6 weeks in, Kate, and we got 46 and a half months to go, right? It's when you measure...
It's flying by.
Yeah, well, it's flying. A lot of stuff are flying. When you measure it in those terms, I mean, what are your thoughts on just this larger disruption we have and what the senator was saying about things?
Yeah, well, I think the point is that there is disruption. Like, that is a certainty, that there is going to be chaos. I think we all sat around this panel about a month ago and said that this was probably not a threat that was going to go away. Mm-hmm. So the question for me is, what has been done in the last 30 days to help us not necessarily remove ourselves from the tariff threat, because I take the point, perhaps those were coming. But what's our response plan to it? So what are we doing, again, to help make energy infrastructure, to better build that in Canada? We still have legislation that makes it very difficult to do that. We still have a sales tax on homes. We still have the carbon tax. So these are all things, ideas and proposals that, yes, don't happen overnight, but probably could happen and be discussed if we had a parliament sitting for the last 60 days to talk about how Canada was going to be able to be on better footing here. So I take the point that, yes, perhaps the tariffs themselves could not have been avoided in this moment, but what could have been avoided is delaying that action in those discussions, because the government it has divided attention right now. They have attention on this, and they also have attention on their leadership race. And to me, that has been missing from the conversation and the accountability on the government right now.
But what's missing in what they've done? I'm curious. Like, I totally take your point. I don't think carbon tax is going to survive the month. But like what's missing from the response to the U.S. that you think should be there that isn't there?
I think that the response that's needed right now from the Liberals is on preparing Canada. So,
right. So the larger economic reform.
The larger economic reform, yes, because I would acknowledge that I think there's been some good work on the border. I think some of it's been for show. I think some of it has had some success. I haven't seen as much in terms of disclosures around immigration. Again, though, you have to be paying pretty close attention to this stuff to know what those impacts are. If we had a House of Commons sitting where ministers could be asked every day for their response on these issues, then that would provide a little bit more visibility to Canadians about what actually is going on. And when we are talking about the longer term planning for Canada, that is not going to happen outside of the House of Commons. That's not going to happen with the government being divided on the leadership issue right now. So that to me is where we need to turn our attention to next.
Okay, Françoise, I wonder what your thoughts are on that. I mean, I know if this goes on and on and on, you're definitely going to need to get legislative changes. There is a consensus amongst the premiers we've heard from today that they can do the acute phase economic response with regulatory authority, but a bigger picture changes to internal trade and pipeline approvals, that is going to require the House of Commons. What are your thoughts on where things are on that front?
I think they'll be back soon enough. And we have to remember that they were frozen. And when I hear the NDP, the Conservatives saying, hey, we should be in the House, I mean, they did everything to remove people from the House and say we need an election. So let's have the election, what I've been saying since God knows when they first got frozen, because nothing really productive was coming out from that place. So let's get an election, a clear mandate to whoever Canadians decide to give the clear mandate, and then let's hopefully move on. So I don't think the next 4 or 5 weeks will make such a difference. Anyway, until today, it was always just gamemanship, and it's still probably going to be for a few more days, a few more weeks. So it gives us time to have that cherished election, and they can all come back with hopefully more productiveness in their files. All parties, NDP, Conservative, everybody, the Liberals, everybody.
So Emily, I wonder where you think people outside of Ottawa may be on this point. I mean, the Conservatives have wanted the legislature back, and they've wanted an election. The NDP have wanted the legislature back and then maybe an election. The Bloc just want an election. The Liberals don't want the legislature back because they want to get their leadership sorted out. And I wonder what Canadians' priorities are. My peer group and professional group, they're sending me pictures of LCBO shelves with no American booze on it, which is maybe a sad reflection on journalists. Where do you think most Canadians are right now in this moment in terms of what they want to see?
I don't know about most Canadians, but I do think that what we need is more existential than EI expansion and such programs. What we need is a clear vision for how we transform the Canadian economy so that there is more of a sovereignty element to Canada. And in some ways, it's actually really interesting to watch as a Quebecer, because even Mark Carney was talking about, being maître chez nous, master in our own home. And it does feel like Canada is having its quiet revolution moment.
It's not that quiet, but it's a good point. Yeah.
And it feels like that is a debate of policy that needs to happen in an election. To me, what would make the most sense is if it was very likely Mark Carney is going to win the Liberal leadership, does not get sworn in as Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, calls an election. Mark Carney runs the election as leader of the Liberal Party, and we get that sorted out in the minimum legal possible number of days. And Justin Trudeau can remain as Prime Minister to sort out this crisis while the election is happening. To me, in terms of responsible leadership, that it's the best case scenario. And Pierre Poilievre, if he has an alternative vision for Canada, if Jagmeet Singh has an alternative vision for what we should be doing about the Canadian economy and Canadian safety and security,
Right.
they would be welcome to put that forward during the election. But it does seem that that premiers and certainly the federal government have the executive power to be able to do the short, long-term help that they need to do, but that the stronger economic vision, that is only something that you can do if you have an election now and we have an actual debate about what the future of this country is. And I really, really hope that this would also be an election in which you have massive record turnout and people by showing up and caring about this election that they actually value Canadian democracy.
Well, the voters of Ontario might be exhausted from showing up in such small numbers, Michelle. I don't know, but like this should be an election that brings people out in droves. We did hear from Mr. Poilievre today, tax cuts, repeal the anti-pipeline legislation, as he calls it, getting rid of the carbon tax. That's the agenda he puts on the table. That's been the agenda he's put on kind of no matter what the issue set is. But do you think this is what the election will be, should be, needs to be about in the next little while?
100% the ballot box issue will be who can deal with the Americans the best, who can position the Canadian economy to be the most robust, and who has that wherewithal that is going to get things done. And I think that it will be the choice between Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre. And I too hope that it is a very high turnout election. I think that Canadians are more engaged than ever before. Certainly throughout my social groups, whether it's the people I went to high school with, the people I went to elementary school with, they're all taking their lists into Canadian stores and trying to figure out, what can I buy to support Canadians? And, I think that is something that there's very few issues that penetrate so deeply across every demographic group, but this is it. And so I think it will be a very interesting election and probably one about more ideas than perhaps we've had in the most recent past.
So Kate, we will get the switch, or at least the indication of the switch in the Liberal leadership on Sunday, right? Here in Ottawa. Emily's idea of Trudeau staying as Prime Minister, Carney running as Liberal leader, I don't know if that's a viable one. I don't know if Mr. Carney would want to not become Prime Minister should he win, or Ms. Freeland should she win, or Karina Gould or Frank Baylis. How quickly do you think we'll end up in an election? This is what I wonder, because when Carney's been asked about it, he says you need to see where things are, presuming he's the front runner, because maybe we need to recall the legislature, maybe we need to do this. What's your sense on the calendar here?
Yeah, I mean, there is also a bit of political strategy that goes into this question. I think there's two elements here. There's the operational side of things, which is, perhaps you do need to swear in a new cabinet or the same cabinet. There might be some things that they want to do through regulation quickly to demonstrate, some change or a step change there. I think the responsible thing to do is to go to an election quickly. Mark Carney is not somebody that has had his name on a ballot before. Yes, he will be elected by his party supporters. Yeah. But at a moment like this, I think it's important that whoever the Prime Minister is secure a mandate from the people. And we should have that period of time, I think, be short, given the situation that we're in.
I think the Liberals might want it to be short to put a spending limit on the huge financial advantages the Conservatives have, wouldn't you? Yeah, there is that tactical reality.
Very true.
Okay, yeah. All right, look, who knows when that time will happen, but our time has come to an end. I want to thank you all, and thank you for being patient with the interruption. We don't get senators very often, so we wanted to do that. Emily Nicola, Michelle Cadario, Françoise Boivin, and Kate Harrison, thank you so much.